So a lot of the times it just was literally more beneficial for us after office days to just at times to just like sleep under the desk. I definitely did that twice. That was definitely the case.
This is Raz. He's a staple of the LCS broadcast for the past few years now. He's known worldwide as funny, charismatic, hardworking, and one of the most honest personalities in the scene. Last time Raz and I talked, we identified a lot of issues with the broadcasts and the logistics behind them and why they occur and how they were trying to fix them. In this episode of the LS Show, we go over the changes that they did to fix those logistically.
Is because we have gotten a lot better in kind of optimizing spaces in which we can be creating content.
The decision to go to a different direction with the LCS?
I think you're right. It became a decision because that was a big goal for the year.
And how they measure fan sentiment.
Like, I care a lot about sentiment because I want to know what people care about going into the next week. I'll get to the first question, which was just like what my week looks like. Definitely feels busier, at least for me. Mostly because like the extra piece of content that's either out right now or will be out in the future. Because like a great example is like, yes, we'll have our meetings on Wednesdays. And then of course, Saturdays, Sundays are going to be our game days. For me, the Fridays and Thursdays, depending on the segments that we're doing, I had a pretty busy weekend where I had to prep for a Player of the Week interview that is this different skit than we do in the past, which is more of like a 90-second speedrun thing. So I put in a lot of effort into preparing for it and doing research based off that. And then there's the stage interviews, which we are on the day. We constantly have to prepare for. There's also the segments that we basically pitch that we either do end of day, which is like pros, or for Emily, it's Are You Smarter Than? Or the telestration segments that I did, like either in Champ Select now, there's this new spot, or there's another one that I also did for before the show. So there's a lot of things. And of course, like just preparing for the new patch, just being as educated as possible. So I would say that last week was for sure my busiest week. The week before that was, okay, maybe that one's a little busier, but just because that was like a super week.
Mm-hmm.
But the Thursdays and Fridays for me are pretty booked, based off of like not only doing one-on-one meetings with my peers, but also just like putting in as much research as possible so the weekend works out well. The Monday, Tuesdays are supposed to be breaks, but on Mondays, as you'd expect, I do both the Caster's Couch with Avali and Flowers. And then this week I did Hotline League with Revenge, and that one was a lot of fun. And that one's like the longest one they had. So like overall, that was a pretty busy week that we put ourselves through. That being said, I was on LPL, so I know what a busier week looks like when you're permanently casting.
I heard you guys. I heard at some point, I don't know if it was you, but there was a point in LPL where people were just bringing their tents or like their little mattresses and pillows and sleeping in the office because there was just so many games and you guys were like on 4 hours of sleep. Did you experience that as well?
Yeah, this was when we were in Oceania covering the LPL, because there were some people like Spawn that was doing OPL, LPL. And then on top of that, we did IWCQ, which was like the version of play-ins before that. And those were usually in ungodly times. And then LPL, we didn't have that many people as that much talent for the games that we were casting. So then when one of our play-by-plays ended up blowing out their voice, this was really early on. He was really new. So that's something that he actually had to discover more about, like the limits of his voice. Then I was like, okay, I'm doing a little bit of play-by-play. And hysterics is doubling down. The moment we realize, wait a minute, we just don't have enough talent for if one person's sick, we're all doomed. So yeah, I know what it definitely looks like when it's harsher. And to answer, what was your other question as well? I forgot that one.
So I wasn't actually just asking the questions. I was just kind of like letting you go like preview of what I was going to ask. So we talked about like sort of schedule. I actually want to follow up a little bit on, you say like you have one-on-one with your peers and do a lot of research and trying to learn.
Yeah.
Where are you looking in terms of the entertainment industry to like research? because like when I'm looking for interviews, like I've been doing a few interviews, I'll watch other people who do interviews. I'll watch Travis Gafford, I'll watch Degon, I'll
Yeah.
watch Thorin. Where do you go to learn like, hey, I have a telestrator segment about like jungling timers? Where do you
Oh, that's
go?
perfect. So for me, there are two things. For that direct example of like doing it, I'm doing a telestrator example. I'll look to my peers first, which is I watch all LPL, I mean LEC. So I'll see what the LEC talent while I'm in the morning. If I notice they have a great delivery on their points, then I'm like, okay, that's really good. There's like nice succinct. Um, and I'll look at my peers as well, and I'll also as a sports, well, appreciator, a lot of it comes down to NBA on TNT for me. I love Kenny Jet Smith's like constant segment where he runs up to the board. It's entertaining because that it's always a race for them, so they find an entertaining way to make a transition to the board. But also, he is loud. He is very dynamic, and he's very clear in the way that he presents his information. And I think that's really all you need because yes, people when they think, oh, educational, they think boring. That's not the case whatsoever. It's you as the talent that is tasked to make it entertaining. So in the way that you're talking about it, the way you're passionate about it, and it's really important in my mind to be dynamic when you're doing so. So like a good example would literally be you have a telestrator segment, you're going through a play, and you've done very minimal drawing. Then what was the point of making it a telestrator segment? And what was the point of like what are you directing people's attention to? So that's already one thing where you can be drawing a little bit more and pulling people's focus more towards the play. And if the camera's on you, then it's important to also engage in the people who are there. Like for instance, if Emily and Jat's sitting there, like pulling them into the conversation after you make your point, or challenging the fans at home. So I always think that, like for me, that's one great example of like Kenny the Jet Smith when he's on NBA on TNT. And also there are times when ESPN has like some good telestrations segments. So I will for that specific thing, I'll look to my peers and then I'll look to external broadcasts that have a lot more experience in doing so. And for me, interviews has been a big um, change for me because I haven't done interviews for a good portion of my career, but now I'm like doing it a lot more frequently. In fact, a lot of the content that I'm putting out right now is me plus player. So that it kind of involves having great interviewing skills. So yes, I'll look to my peers, and I think Jad and Emily are perfect. Emily's literally a career journalist slash interviewer. So the way that she presents information and talks to players is excellent. Ashley Kang is incredible at it as well. Yes, you already mentioned Degon and Travis. Like for me, the way that Degon goes about interviews in a very casual way to break down barriers, I think is really positive. And then, of course, for me, like going back to NBA talk, there's a lot of interviewers that I love listening into. For me, it was Bomani Jones and a little bit of Stephen A. A lot of it, and also recognizing the different style of interviews. Because for me, sometimes I think a weakness for me is that I'm too, ironically, because I'm talking a lot, I can be too talkative. And a lot of the times, less is more. So just like presenting topic in a way that makes the player feel comfortable and letting them go has been like a Larry King style. It's been a lot of like, it's a style of a lot of successful interviewers, sort of like Joe Rogan, I guess, is an example. So kind of knowing what style you like. Personally, I'm trying to work towards being less talkative in an interview, letting the players just go off of like a small topic hit.
Which I wanted to bring that up because I didn't used to make any content, and now that I'm making a little bit of content, I realize how much time and effort and research you actually make for like every single piece. And a lot of times we ask, why aren't they doing more? Or why aren't they doing this? Well, like, oh, that sucked. It's like, yeah, that took me like a week. Like I've been practicing and doing all this, and you might not notice the slow improvements, but there's a lot that goes into it. And so when people are like, oh, the LCS is a better product. Good job, Mark. Yes, good job, Mark. But then the talent had to do a lot of like weightlifting to actually get there. So I really wanted to highlight like, it's not just, hey, we have an idea and we're going to make it happen immediately. It's like there's so much that goes into it, which is awesome.
I want to give like a lot of props to producers, the video editors, like the people in the back that put in a lot of effort, like the photographers. I'm obviously going to miss people, but in terms of like the production element, I think it's been a big boost. And a lot of the ideas that we presented or they presented, like for instance, pastry's been our on our content side, have been amazing, and it's only been a level up. And I also wanted to include the people that I don't think it feels bad for, because I remember in week one when they got let go, there's a lot of people that we had on our LCS side that put a lot of incredible fucking work into making like getting the show started too. And to me, I love and appreciate them. So I think there's been a lot of people behind the camera that has um, really sweat to make this a success. And so far, we're going to week five, and it's been a massive success from what we've done. Um, and oh yeah, to answer your question a lot earlier, I just remembered. And some of the skits that we did that's promoting a lot of the positive change that we have, like Weekend Raz or me, the first one, which was me yelling at a camera, the golfing thing. All of those ideas um, were built off of all the big changes that were announced coming into this split that you know wouldn't have been done if not for the feedback and information that everybody pushed for.
Honestly, the skits are probably my favorite part of LCS besides the games. Like they're just
Yeah,
so funny and you never know what to expect. That's the other thing. It's like it's not the same thing every single time. Each time it's like, especially the one with you, it just took such a weird turn that you don't expect. And I love it. There are these TikTokers. I can't think of one's name, but he starts off like the TikTok where someone's ringing the doorbell and it's like a pizza delivery guy, but then it turns out the pizza delivery guy, it's his house and everyone else is like the thief. And then like one of them turns out to be a cop. And then all of a sudden they're jumping from a helicopter and they start swimming and it just makes no sense. And it's awesome. And that's like the vibe that I got where you were just drinking. That's like, what is going on here? Not to that extreme, obviously, but it's just, it's awesome. And I love that you guys are being more creative and have more like just saying what you want to do.
and the funny thing is that skit like wasn't even my personal idea. Like it was one of our writers and what's it called? So another content guy on my side. It was like I'll just say their name, Daniel and Manny. So for me, like I had an idea, and that's still not released yet. I will just say sneak peek. It's just like a straight Pulp Fiction rip, but so that one's like I got the goatee and everything for it. But anyways, so there's a lot of ideas that get thrown out there. This is the idea that they had is like, oh, this is like a weekend rest thing. Like, you want to, like, what do you think about the script and the idea? I was like, this is hilarious. I love it. I'm down for it. And like, I'll bring some of my own stuff. Basically, like the bougie stuff. I was like, hey, there's just a lot of stuff that I have in my closet that I haven't used since like finals or something. Let's start bringing them out and make myself look as pretentious as possible. Um, so there's a lot of people in that room that start spitting ideas. So yeah, credit to them.
Talk to me a little bit about being able to fit all that where people are still enjoying LCS in the shortened transition time. You guys have way less time to do stuff, but it just feels like you guys are doing more. And I don't know if it's because people are catching more. Like personally, maybe I'm just like catching more of the things because there's less downtime, so I'm watching more, or if it's because there is more to watch, like less analysis and more skits.
I think there might be more. It's really tough for me to say. It feels like I think the one thing that makes it feel like there's a lot more now is because we have gotten a lot better in kind of optimizing spaces in which we can be creating content. Like a good example is like if there's a game going on, and let's just say all of our cameramen are being used for like a champ select or something. Like now we're still able to make a content skit at the same time. So if a player gets sent to us from the previous game, is like, okay, no, we know what content we're doing. We can start as soon as possible. We don't have to wait a ridiculous amount of time, because beforehand we'd have to wait for the full champ select to end, and then we can make the content piece. Like now we don't have to do that anymore. So we've really optimized in between games the content that we're shooting. And of course, before the show, like we're literally shooting now. The last time I was there, we were shooting a content piece it was like just an interview with the coaches at the same time as that start of day content piece. And like, so we're just shooting a lot more. So that's definitely happening. So I think it definitely feels like that because we also have a lot more eyes on the content piece, because it's not just being thrown straight at the top of day, and it's being done in between games and also sometimes literally during the game when we actually have a sought interview, which I mean just an interview with a player and we get their opinions on a take. So I think both are happening at the same time.
All right. The other thing I noticed as well, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, is I love this model where each team should try to convince me why I should be their fan. Meanwhile,
Yeah,
the LCS should convince me why I should watch the LCS. And LCS never really did that. It was normally, hey, how do we highlight players? How do we highlight stories? You're still doing that, but there's like this whole like why you should watch LCS. What like
yeah,
LCS live patch. We're different. You should want to watch us because we're going to be playing Smolder before anyone else in the world can even like think of playing it. And I think that's
yeah.
really, really cool and I really like it. Talk to me a little bit about like, is that a decision you guys actually made on purpose, or was that something that ended up becoming a byproduct that you guys just like, oh, it works, let's do it?
I think you're right. It became a decision because that was a big goal for the year. When you make the choice of like, why should people care about watching the LCS? Well, number one, we're going to be a patch ahead of every league and certain patches, of course. You like, I'm not too sure what's going to happen after this break, but like, we're going to be a patch ahead. So like, we're the closest to live as you can get. There may be some times where a champion gets released and we can't show it immediately, like Smolder was. But like, you'll be watching as basically what you're playing on in your live server. We're playing on the LCS. That's number one. Like a great reason. Shorter transitions, blah blah blah. So like, I do agree. And weekends. That was actually a big one. Is like the fact that we came back to the weekends. So yes, like actively with all of these positive changes, what's really hard for a lot of leagues to do in general is to promote the positives as best as you possibly can, so people get the reason to watch. Like you can make these changes, but if people don't know, then that's an L. Like no matter what, like you're not optimizing and not being able to get those fans back. So those skits that we did, at least initially, we didn't even put them on our broadcast because the idea was we would send it to LEC or CBLOL or anything like that, and then they would play it at the end of their broadcast, which would give them a reason. Hey, like if you're still there, we will be playing LCS soon, so you can hop on over to the LCS channel right after. Which I appreciate those leagues for being able to do. But that was the initial goal, and then when they realized, wait a minute, these are just good pieces. Like we could put them in our own show too. Then we started like saying, okay, then let's start doing that. So yeah, we are trying to get as many people as possible to watch the LCS. This includes if you're just a player in North America, we're giving you a reason to watch. The games are exciting, so thank you teams for that. But also, if you want to learn how to jungle, or if you want to learn this, like the LCS is going to be the best way to at least locally to be able to learn what those changes actually do. And when Smolder came out, we've had like multiple pieces that are like, hey, these are the players telling you how they learn Smolder, what Smolder does. And then when we had the stage interview, when I had that stage interview with Tomo, he gave out tips and tricks on Smolder as a champion. So I think you can definitely go for a wider reach by just trying to attack the players that are in your region, but also, yes, giving the reason to players that to fans that probably watched your league in the past, but then were probably hurt by the fact that they couldn't anymore, based on either it's on the weekdays or it's a little too late. Now we're earlier, and we're on the weekends. So it's right after LEC, and now you have a reason to watch again. So we're trying to catch as many people as possible while still telling the stories of these teams. So it's hard, but yeah, the priority of selling the league has definitely been higher.
Yeah, I feel like you guys almost fully outside of like waiting room moved team stories to during the draft, and I noticed the drafting takes longer than it like when draft ends to loading into the game. There's a significant increase in time compared to last split for like the game to load. And I don't know if that has anything to do with like how you guys are recording and then replaying the drafts or whatnot. But I have noticed that you guys have tried to move talking about the teams, building their stories, talking about what players you should keep an eye on, including like what they're playing currently into that period of time, since it's a little bit longer. Is it actually longer like that, the transition time, or is that maybe just
I don't
my
think
feeling?
it is. I think it might be the feeling. I do know that the first game of the day, we definitely go to the stage, at least the images. For instance, it stops being on us after a certain point. We still have the countdown to when the game starts, but we start showing images of the stage a lot more earlier. So it may give the idea of, okay, like this is maybe the game's going to start, but it doesn't. We do not extend the time in champ select to game. At least I'm almost certain that's the case because, but what we do for sure is we try and stuff as much content within the champ select, and thankfully we do have a cheat sheet because of the recording of the champ select. So a great example is if we just know that the champ select is spicy, if there's like, oh, there's a smolder, there's a Hui, there's a this, there's a that, like, okay, let's just maybe not have the segments that we were planning to do during the champ select, and we have to actually um, talk about the draft, like the big pieces of the draft themselves. But to answer that quickly, I would say I don't think we've been longer on that one, but I'd have to look back and check. But I think we've tried to keep the champ select the closest we can to the game as possible.
Okay, yeah, I don't know why. It just feels like loading into the game has felt like it's taking a lot longer.
I will say though, those first 2 weeks, oh my God, with how many pauses start immediately as the game is starting.
Yeah.
At least for me, that was why it felt like it takes so long to get into game, is because a lot of the times you'll either have a delay or you'll have like an actual pause. So at least that's how I would feel it. But I don't know if I would have to look back and check if that's really the case. But at least for the first 2 weeks, it was definitely long.
Another positive change that the LCS has done is I don't really use Twitch for LCS. I prefer the YouTube viewer. But for the first time ever, I think I've been watching LCS since, I don't know, 2015 religiously. Before that as well, I've never like voted or done any sort of fan interaction with the broadcast. This is the first time I am doing it, and it just feels completely natural, and it feels like what I say actually matters.
Yeah.
Or like I can stand behind it. You guys have been showing a lot more fan stuff. There was like the Vigar V2 video on Karma. Like you guys had that playing. There was like IMT Sharpie, the fact that he was the only person to get IMT beating NRG, I think, or Cloud9, I don't remember, and getting everything right. You guys were shouting him out. It feels like people are more involved, and I don't know if it's creating like a fake sense of like a lot of people just like standing there and cheering, or if it's actually there, but it feels like it's there.
You know, you probably just made one of my producers extremely happy. That's the one piece of feedback every week he keeps giving where it's like, guys, there's like a pause happening or this is happening. We need, like, you can definitely find a way to talk to the chat, like pull takes from the chat or make it a larger community feeling with the chat as a whole. That's what we're trying to do for sure. I think we're trying to be as connected to the fans as possible. That was definitely something that Mark wanted to push coming into this year. And we did this a little bit last year, as you probably know, is that we have a Discord community. We should use them when it comes to voting for, like if we want to have a vote on a specific topic on broadcast, we could definitely pull our Discord channel. The greatest example is like a predictions. Every day we do a prediction. We should include our Discord predictions as well. So we're trying to make it so. Oh, and also some content pieces, like there's like a questions in a bowl or something, and we're trying to get a pro player to answer questions that we pick up from the community. We're trying to give our Discord community a lot of a voice. And now we're in a cast. We had Jat one cast. I forget which game it was. It was like an IMT game for sure. I can remember that. Where he was like this on-field reporter where he was taking topics from Twitch chat, Twitter. He even said Slack, but he rejected Emily's take, which was a lukewarm take. And he just wanted to send it in Azale's direction. And that was a lot of fun. We have a community, especially if you're on Twitch. You shape your community 100,000%. And as long as you are connected, then I think it makes it for a better broadcast. As long as you can do it in the best way possible. As long as you're not taking it like a take from, Poop Daniel or something, 420, and he just comes out with some weird, this random stuff. No, you can shape your community's, not just perception, but feel them, make them feel more involved and connected to the game. As long as, it's a seamless way. And that's what we're trying to do for sure. So we're getting better at it. But God knows that the next meeting's gonna come, and that producer is gonna be like, guys, there was a clear pause, and you did not like acknowledge Twitch chat and what at all. So, and we're trying to make it. I know a big thing is, um, a big thing that we're trying to do as well is I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, trying to make the Twitch chat votes, a lot more natural because there's a delay on broadcast for sure, from broadcast to Twitch. So trying to make the question come out, or like basically trying to let the Twitch chat votes lead the broadcast question, or make the broadcaster's question, like let's say Azale asked the question in the chat. It's gonna take some time for the Twitch chat to like get that information, send that vote for him to respond to it. Like that's gonna be hard. But there is a way to do it. So there's a few things that we're trying to push for it to be a lot more interactive.
You can now become a member of my channel to get early access to all my videos, private polls, chat rooms, and updates, and to say in what direction I take my content in. So make sure to check it out. Yeah, I think, like I said, I agree with a lot of the... I was very skeptical, by the way, when Mark went on and was like, oh, we're going to cut down transition times a lot. And a lot of like the big bets that he was making. I think he had 3 big bets. I was very skeptical, but I think so far you guys have done a very good job implementing those in a way, especially Twitch chat. I was like, man, do I really want Twitch chat on my league? Like, do I really want to see like a bunch of kappas when like Vulcan Flash misses his Q? I don't know that I want to see that. You know, it'll be funny sometimes, but I think you guys have done a very good job at giving it its moment and actually making it feel involved. You bringing other people onto the cast, not just players. You brought Mrs. Chim Chim. I had no idea who she was. Now I do. I see her streams sometimes. I've never watched it, but maybe now I do watch it because she was on the LCS. Even Wild Turtle, I thought that was really cool. You didn't have him for like the entire... having them do interviews, I thought was really smart, especially the fact that Fake God won that game and Turtle was like, who's the best coach you've had? He's like, oh, Turtle. It was just... It lets the pros kind of shine a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing I am sad about is there's less analytical content. There's less time for Emily to just say, hey, let's watch Umti's jungle path this game because he was a maniac and he flashed over that wall. Like, we don't have that time to do that, and it doesn't live anywhere else. I do think that it's the right choice, even if I think I'm the minority, kind of like what happened with someone's take on Hotline League the other day. Saying like, oh, we missed this. Like, yeah, I'm probably the minority. I think Emily Rand also talked about that on Making the Rounds with Kelsey Moser. She was just like, look, I love doing it, but you're the minority. So we're just catering to what brings the views. And I agree with that. Yeah. My question is, why doesn't that also live on a separate, like how Pros lives on the YouTube channel, but it's not part of the broadcast? Can't that also happen where you have more analytical content that's not on the broadcast, but still on the YouTube channel? That way, maybe you can, at the very least, you can get a feel for how many people want this.
I completely agree that it should live somewhere else. Whether it should be on the YouTube channel, I've always personally liked the idea of what NBA on ESPN does. A lot of the times, if they have for them, their challenge is we are a televised broadcast, and not a lot of people have TV or even watch TV or care to watch TV. So what we'll do is we'll just cut the good beats, good elements that are analytical or something that is like a hot take that was a highlight on our broadcast, and we'll make it live on a separate YouTube channel. I think that's a really good idea. I'm not too sure on the demand on that or what the viewership would look like for the LCS side, but I do think something like that could live. But we do have, I think for all of us as talent, because we do push out content. The most recent example is we did a whole diagnosis of what's wrong with C9 on the pre-show, and everyone had their own segments or takes. I had a telestrator say my telestrator. I felt sad because that was my favorite telestrator segment I'd done in a little bit, and then I got bombed by my audio pack dying. So that one sucked for me. But she also had a really good telestrator take, or her focus on the draft. That stuff can just if I like that, I can put it on my Twitter account, or I could even put it on my TikTok or Instagram. If I really enjoyed an analytical beat that we had, I can always push my own stuff on my own channels, and I think that's a great option for all of us as talent. I do think that there probably is a space for it on a separate YouTube channel, and people would enjoy it, as long as we're constantly pushing content to it, I think it's a good idea. But that's probably a future thing. And I will definitely, I'm sure Emily and myself would definitely be pushing for stuff like that because, um, you know, it does suck. Like we come in and we're analysts, and I know I came in as like previously as a coach, and my biggest thing was not only would I be in charge of telling the storylines for the players, but also like breaking down and teaching some aspects of the game, along I'm sure with Emily, um, that we care deeply about. And so like yeah, that's gonna be yes, we are the minority, um, and yes, it's not gonna be the most entertaining thing in the broadcast, but there is an audience, and I think we can get that stuff out there. We can do it, but it's not on like a centralized YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Jad has his JLXP, which he hasn't done an
That's
episode
true.
since the first one. Emily does
Rip.
the what is it called again? Making the rounds with
Yeah.
every weekend or every Monday. I don't know. Every week
Yeah.
with Kelsey Moser. So there's that, and then you're like you said, you're doing the Caster's Couch, which is a little more memey, but
It's
still
fun, maybe.
brings.
And I always try and like, God, this is me holding myself responsible because my goal was to try and do a lot more VOD reviews on stream for my personal stream. But then I did that and I pushed it to like, TikTok or whatever, and I was like a good spot for it. But then I started to fall off either because of like my right eye having a lot more dryness in certain weeks. I did not definitely I may have a condition, but I didn't check it. But so I just like kind of rested it a little bit. Um, or when I'm actually streaming, a lot of times I'm like, okay, I think there's more of a demand for just playing the game rather than watching the game. And there's a lot of people that end up doing that in co-streamers. But I agree. I think I do wish there was more breakdown analytical content on our teams, and I definitely think there's a space for it if someone asks. But that has not happened so far.
Yeah. Besides that and this or that being on break, please bring it back. I think
Yeah.
the LCS has been doing a phenomenal job this split. Like I said, I don't know that there are more fans that are engaging, regardless of like the actual number of views. How many of those people that are watching are engaging? It just feels like there's more.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, I don't really care personally because for me it's just like a positive experience.
Yeah.
But it at least it signals that there's a move in the right direction. And I think maybe it was Greeley back when he was commissioner who was talking about fan satisfaction, how to quantify how fans like how they experience the broadcast. So I do think that has improved, which is awesome.
Another thing that's improved that I enjoyed is like our in-person experience. Sure, yes, Weekend does a whole bunch to improve our week in-person experience, but also we've had like a ton of fan meets. So credit to our events team that not only do we have like what was like three or I feel like we've had three after parties so far, which is like our tailgates. The best way for our teams to be in front of the fans and have like fan meets for their players. And of course, like us as a broadcast have had fan meets every time. I think that makes it really good because the one element that I feel like we missed before COVID was like I remember when I was in 2016 and there was an obligation for all teams to have their players out doing pictures and taking autographs and like just being present for the fans. And since COVID, that has just been kind of like completely washed and the in-person experience be kind of gutted. And I think finally we're bringing that back where if you're a fan of the LCS and you're in LA or you're planning to come in LA, like you get to get a picture, talk to an audience or something, or get an autograph for like a player that you've enjoyed the most, and that's something that I think goes a long way to pushing sentiment.
How do you guys judge sentiment? Is there like a I'm sure you guys have some sort of formula that you use between like social media and whatnot to judge fan
Yeah.
sentiment, but I don't know if it's something you're privy to, but do you know how they sort of judge that?
I don't know how LCS judge sentiment. I'm sure there's an actual metric from their side that's a lot less feely. I know that's for sure the case. At least for me, I care a lot about sentiment because I want to know what people care about going into the next week. I can disagree with it. I can agree with it. It doesn't really matter. What matters to me is that I am not out of touch because that's the one thing I think is pretty damning on my sense of motivation. If I'm out of touch, why am I out of touch? Am I just not, do I not care about the broadcast, or I not care about the scene? Like that hits my personal motivation. So I feel like if I care about the league, if I care about the game, I should definitely be in touch with the community. So you probably see me on every Twitch channel. Honestly, I'm just a bit of a gremlin. I'm constantly on Twitter, either making some like dumbass comment or like just responding to people. I do read Reddit as well. I read like for if I'm in a YouTube video, I'll go through the comments, not just to like I don't care about people's perception necessarily of me. Um, like I'm a sports fan. I can despise a commentator, love a commentator. That's not going to shake. Like that's just fans being fans. So I don't care if people love or hate me. But what I do care about is like, what do people think about like the teams? If there's right now a great example is like there's a whole bunch of negative sentiment on Cloud9 and Fudge and JoJo and all this stuff. Oh, Vulcan, I mean specifically, or Berserker. Like, do I agree with that? Because that can shape the content that we have going into the next week. If I feel like, because I think Fudge had an incredible weekend, but they still lost games. I mean, should I be making content specifically on what that player is doing for his team that people are not really seeing? That's why I think being having your head to the ground and seeing what the community is thinking is really important. So sentiment, I think, is really valuable, and that's how I judge for sentiment. Is I'm on a lot of social channels, not because I'm forced to, but because I actually just generally like doing it, and it informs me at times of what the sentiment is publicly. I'd say the initial time in which I had to really, which I realized the importance of sentiment was like great examples like LCS with co-streamers. There'd be a time where co-streamers, specifically LS, would say something about Leandries, and then like, oh, players are not building this, blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, seems like there's fans are getting pretty fired up on either a certain item build, or you'll go on and see your doublelift like criticizing like our 80 carries, and you'll be okay, people are not really high on this 80 carry because of the sentiment there. It's like, how do I agree with it? Do I think they're going too harshly? A lot of the times co-streamers will judge a team on a international level rather than regional level, and if you do that, you're not going to say a lot of positive things about a lot of our teams, or like about any of the Western teams, to be honest, except for like maybe G2. So like it's important to be informed about what the sentiment is, and that's how I generally will be informed on public sentiment. It's a roundabout way of saying I don't know what the LCS does to like to judge their metrics, but that's just like my process personally.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair. That also gives me some input on how to do it as well. The Cloud9 subreddit, my lord, there are some people who are just like so like trying to break all emergency glass and just like tear the whole thing down, like get rid of Mythy, get rid of every single player, get basically import G2. And I'm like, oh, like come on guys. But there are some reasonable people.
They'll have a 2-0 week, and then those people are completely gone. That's the most hilarious thing about it too, is that people will come out with every fire emergency exit, just sack everybody. And then once the week actually they start performing, people are like, yeah, you know what? I always believed in them. Kappa. That's just how it is. But yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, the funny thing is, they make it sound like they've been saying this since the very beginning, which they haven't. If you just look in their history, they're like, oh my God, Cloud9 is 3-0. We're going to win the split. Thank God Jack finally won an offseason. And the next one is like, Jack completely lost the offseason. How could he possibly think that spending all his budget on JoJo made sense and not getting a coaching staff? I'm like,
I'm dead.
make it make sense. But yeah, I have another question for you. It's a little bit off topic, but when a game ends and you know that you have to do an interview with someone,
yeah,
how do you prep for that? Totally not asking for myself, by the way.
I know what you mean. I think that's the biggest challenge was not only me trying to become a better interviewer, but also there are a few times where, like a great example, there are some interviews that are just based off of Twitch chat voting. So like I don't know who I'm interviewing until maybe near the end of a game. And so I'm like, okay, it made it easier for me to kind of do certain preps. Like for instance, I'll be like, okay, what is a team interview question that I think it does not matter who I'm talking to, like they would have an answer for this question, like either a question on team atmosphere, or like if a team is on a 5 or 4 game slip, like a Cloud9 or in this case, like an NRG are in, like speaking to more of a team-wide question, I can definitely hammer out maybe 2 questions off that alone. And then I'll watch while watching a game, I'm like, okay, I think if this team is going to win, these 2 people are probably going to be my interview targets. And if this other team is going to win, these 2 people are going to be my interview targets. So now I can start thinking in my head, all right, what individual questions would I ask some of these players based off if they do win or not? And then as you get to the middle portions of the game, you're like, okay, this team's gonna lose. Like, there's no way this team's winning. Dignitas is gonna lose or something. Now I can scrap maybe 3 or 4 questions that I was gonna ask, and then move into the direction of the winning team. And then I'll try to make a decision. Oh yeah, if it's a Twitch chat vote, they'll actually make a decision for me. Like maybe 23 or so minutes into the game, it's gonna be pretty. They don't make it last minute, which I appreciate. That would be hell. And then I start building like specific individual questions on that one. So that's like how I go about it. I think one thing I need to get better at is reacting to the interview in real time as it's happening and asking specific follow-up questions based off the answer they've given me. Because like the best example with that was the APA interview where I was on stage with him and he says like C9 downgraded in 2 roles. Now I know APA is a shit talker and he just say things when he doesn't really believe it. Like I know that based off his Twitter history where he will, and even in the interview question, I'm like, is there something there between you and JoJo or are you just doing that for entertainment? First of all, I shouldn't let him go with the is this entertainment part. If it's just entertainment, he should just say that rather than giving him out. But like he said it was just entertainment, so I'm like, okay, like I don't think you really believe it. But I think it's probably a better decision in that moment to just, it's like, okay, you said there's 2 downgrades, explain yourself. So then he can get the way out. So like honestly, that's like the kind of feedback I'd give myself after like some of my interviews. I'm like, okay, I think the questions I'm asking are solid. But if he says something that's just like out of left field, then I have to go into it rather than judging myself that he's not going to give me anything and moving on, which I think, you never know. You might get a gold nugget in there.
Yeah, I say that because week 1, week 2, I just have a document for like every player I requested. I'm like, I'm gonna ask this question, that question, and then it's like I might prepare 10 different documents for people, and then I get one person, and I assumed that he was gonna be the winner, but he was the loser because IMT beat C9 somehow. Like, so okay, I just have to actually watch the game and then come up with my questions.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is. And a lot of my interviews, a lot of the times I don't hit the players with the game related, unless if that game is great or if it means a lot. I'll be like, okay, I already have like a few questions that I would give teams based off of how their split's going or how they're doing personally. And like for me, what I care about in interviews a lot of the times are like what the players' goals are going into their split, because like that's something they probably struggle and ask themselves that questions like throughout a week, like throughout a scrim week, or throughout a break, or all of off season. So I'm sure they'll give me something great on like some of their personal goals. It could be life goals, but in this case, a lot of the times, like, hey, you guys are struggling or you guys are doing really well. What is something you've been working on personally? Those type of questions I enjoy. Whereas Emily's going to ask a lot more in-game related questions about like someone's jungle pathing, or like interpersonal relationships within a team. And then Jad just loves drama, which I enjoy too. Jad finds something that's like really spicy, he's just gonna go straight for it. Like, so I appreciate that about them. That's why you end up getting different interview questions from several different talent.
Random unsolicited advice, not even advice, it's a request. Mm-hmm. The FlyQuest versus IMT game, I think that was like the last game of last weekend. There were where they played TF bot.
Yeah.
IMT wards that little like pixel brush in case Inspired wants to invade. They see Inspire invade. Armeo goes, oh, he's invading, I'm leaving, instead of like fighting him. And then back, and then you have IMT bot lane who could have left the wave and went and messed them up, but they didn't. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, first of all, I didn't even notice that they warded it, but then I looked back and I was like, oh wait, they actually knew all about this. What on earth happened with their decision making, rather than, oh, it was just unplayable because it was TF bot. It seemed like they were prepped for it. Like they warded, they knew that it was going to happen. that's something I would have loved Emily be like, or yourself just making a segment on and being like, what happened, IMT?
Yeah.
Or like explaining it. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I'm just a fan. I don't really play. I play ARMs, man. I don't know how the game
That's
works.
fair.
So yeah, that would have been cool to see. I think. I don't know why
That's a
that came up.
yeah, I know what you mean. I would say, God, I that was a few days back, so I don't remember that specific example, but I know what you're talking about. But that was also, I think, last game of the day, which is like you're already pretty set on what the end of day is going to look like, and you'd have to think, okay, well, if we care enough about the subject, we'll talk about it in the next day. If I remember correctly, I think that was just a tough one to defend because Callista is like the fucking queen of level ones. So if you do pull a 3v3 into that early, you might end up still losing. But I would have to look back at that game specifically. So I agree. If you see something, if like a talent or even just like casters see something in a specific game and they want to like expand upon it, make a segment, it is a great idea. You can do it. It's a little harder if it's end of day because you'd have to be like, okay, I care about it so much that we're not doing it next week. You know what? You're not getting away from this one, Tactical. I am doubling down for a next week content. Or I'll just do it on my personal channel.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. That's example too much, but yes, if there is a piece that I care a lot about, usually this is actually something I struggle with a lot personally, where I'm like, it's just better to do a better produced product on the broadcast. So then I'll wait until the next week or something to actually present that on broadcast rather than putting it on my personal YouTube channel. Or no, just personal channels in general. My YouTube channel's abandoned.
I know, that's sad.
Yeah. So that's going to be on us as talent, like to try and bring more analytical content, either to broadcast, but if there's no space, which oftentimes is the problem, to our own channels. So keep kicking us if there's not enough. I think that's a good challenge whenever you don't feel like the balance is there, because that's our entire goal, is to try and keep that balance.
I think the nice thing is that even outside of the LCS broadcast, there's so much LCS content this year, even with like less teams, less games. With the break, there's just so much content that's coming out, either from fans or from actual like ex pros, or there's a lot, and so it never really feels dull, which is nice. It feels like every day, even when LCS doesn't come out with like a pros or whatever content, there is something about the LCS, whether it's LS reacting to that C9 versus 100 Thieves games, or I Will Dominate, whether it's, I Will Dominate and Degon talking about the game with Monty, whether it's interviews, like there's just always something, which is nice. And I like that everything is feeding into the LCS, and it shows, I think.
I'm glad. And also, just a small aside, I remember I did an interview with Nick Jersey, which I'm sure will be coming out at some point. I think there's a room for just journalists within the LCS. It's vibrant again, which I'm happy about. Usually that room is pretty empty, except for like maybe a Degon or a Travis or something, which means that there's more interest. There's a larger space for content to come out about the broadcast or about our teams, which hasn't been the case in a long while. So more people talking about our games, more people breaking down these stories, more people, if they see like a crazy subreddit about a player, responding to it, because Dom's not going to mince his words. If he thinks something is like, a fan has a stupid take, that guy's going to go in. Like stuff like that I appreciate. And as long as we have content about the games, and the games are exciting for us, people to actually care about it, then I'm happy about that. Like, I think the one big win from the last week that we ended up telling a story about 100 Thieves is like, we brought out the fact that they're the bloodiest team of all major regions. That's something where we recognize that from one of our teams. Kudos to the coaching staff and the players for being as bloody as they are. But now we can tell a story based off that, which I think we're doing a much, much better job of that within the games than we did in like the last couple years.
Oh, I completely agree. I feel that as well. But to your journalist point, I didn't know that this wasn't how it is, because it's my first split doing it. But my God, sometimes I have to wait for like 5 people ahead of me to do their interviews. Like,
Oh
and this is
no.
just remotely. So I'll see like Ashley Kang go, and then sometimes I'm first. I'm not complaining or anything, but there'll be
Yeah.
Ashley Kang, and then David will get someone, and then Shibi will go, and then like a couple of people from like PentaNet or PentaQ. I don't even know.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Pentakill, yeah.
yeah, and like by the time I'm like, oh, okay, I'm up next, and then I pause the game, and then yeah, by the time I finish my interview, like the game's almost over, so I'm like trying to catch up because I have an interview for the next game, and it's like, oh God, it's so hectic. But I love it. It's cool. It's awesome seeing content being made. I felt like we missed that last split. There wasn't that much
Yeah.
content. Even in person, I think there's this guy, Jay, I think is his name. Like he lives close to me. I'm on the East Coast, and he flies out to do interviews, which is crazy.
That is
But yeah,
insane.
he flies out to do the interviews. He didn't the past couple weeks because he was busy, but there's interest, which is cool. I think you answered all of my questions about the LCS. I think the conclusion is, yeah, you guys are doing great. Keep doing it because it's working.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah, and
The
thanks.
thing is, like, I appreciate that. I would always say, like, keep challenging us, especially in the balance that you're mentioning, and finding more angles to put out our analytical content. Because even if the whole thing of people being minorities, like, there's still a fan base around that, and still a need for it. And that's you don't have to ask like Emily, myself, or Jad to like care about like analytical stuff. Like that's what we came in for, and we're also changing based off of the needs of the people. So keep challenging us. We'll keep basically trying to innovate and get better, and even just like honestly catch up to a lot of the good content that's already out there right now on like TikTok, Instagram, and all that. That's already succeeding, because that's how we grow the league. Honestly.
All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much to Raz for coming on. It really is always a pleasure to speak with him and to sort of be able to have someone on the broadcast kind of tell us what's going on behind the scenes and how and why, not just how, but actually why did the broadcast do this? Why are they doing this? So it's really been a pleasure to talk to him. You should check out his Twitter and his Twitch. He streams sometimes, so you should check that out. You should also subscribe because what I don't understand is the majority of the people that are watching and commenting, I don't know about commenting, but the majority of the people that watch are not subscribed. So just go ahead and subscribe. It's pretty easy. Like if you just go down, you'll see like a button that says subscribe, hit that button and we'll both be happy.